A Mother's Love. In the vibrant but modest town of Ibadan, nestled between the rolling hills of western Nigeria, lives Sarah, a woman known for her strength and resilience. Widowed while pregnant, she had faced more than her fair share of challenges. Her husband's passing left her alone with the responsibility of raising their son, Jude. From the day he was born, Jude became the center of her world, her reason for fighting through life's harsh realities. Sarah worked tirelessly as a street vendor, selling handmade crafts, intricate beadwork, woven baskets, and colorful cloths at the local market. She often rose before dawn to prepare for the day, her hands shaping each item with precision. Her body ached from the long hours, but her spirit remained unbroken, fueled by her love for Jude and her hope for his future. The town of Ibadan, with its bustling markets and narrow streets, was Sarah's home. Every corner reminded her of her struggle, but also her small victories. She knew every vendor, every customer by name, and they knew her as the quiet woman who always smiled despite her circumstances. Jude was now a young man, intelligent and full of promise. His mother had instilled in him a love for learning, and his natural talent earned him a scholarship to one of the best schools in the city, an elite private academy that served the wealthy children of Ibadan's upper class. While this was a dream come true for Jude, it also came with its challenges. The students at the academy came from well-to-do families, with lives that were worlds apart from Jude's. Though Jude was bright and determined, he struggled to fit in. He kept to himself, his eyes always on his books, his mind focused on the future. But his classmates noticed his quiet demeanor and old, worn-out clothes, and some of them saw it as an opportunity for mockery. One afternoon, during a break between classes, Jude stood outside, reviewing his notes. As he flipped through the pages of his well-worn textbook, he felt the eyes of his classmates on him. Turned, a tall, brash boy from a wealthy family, sauntered over with his friend Bolaji. "Hey, Jude," Turned called out, a smirk on his face. "Still using that old phone? Can't you ask your mom to get you a new one? Or is she still too busy selling baskets at the market?" Jude felt his face flush, but he remained calm. "My phone works just fine, Turned," he said quietly, turning back to his notes. Bolaji laughed. "Yeah, but you're at the top school in Ibadan. Don't you want to fit in with the rest of us? Or do you just like being the odd one out?" Jude didn't answer. He knew there was no point in arguing with them. He had seen this side of his classmates before, their cruel jabs at his modest background, the way they used their wealth as a weapon. He had learned to tune them out, to focus on what really mattered. "Come on, Jude, don't be like that. We're just trying to help," Tom added, his tone dripping with mock sympathy. Without looking up, Jude responded, "I'm fine, thanks." And with that, he walked away, his heart heavy but his resolve unshaken. At home, things were different. Sarah and Jude's small but cozy house was filled with love. Every evening after school, Jude would sit with his mother at the kitchen table, telling her about his day while she prepared dinner. The smells of freshly cooked stew filled the air as Sarah listened intently, always asking about his classes, his teachers, and his friends. "School was fine today," Jude said one evening, trying to hide the tension in his voice as he avoided mentioning the teasing from Tond and Bolaji. Sarah looked at her son, sensing that something was wrong. "Jude, are you sure? You seem troubled." Jude hesitated, not wanting to burden his mother with the cruelty he faced at school. "It's nothing, Mom. Just tired from studying." Sarah smiled gently, but deep down, she knew there was more to the story. She could see the weariness in his eyes, the way he carried the weight of something heavier than just schoolwork. But she didn't press him. Instead, she reached across the table and took his hand. "You're doing so well, Jude. I'm proud of you. No matter what happens, remember that." Her words were like a balm to his soul, and for a moment, the worries of the day faded away. As the weeks passed, the taunting from Ton and Bolaji continued. They mocked Jude for his outdated clothes, his lack of fancy gadgets, and his quiet demeanor. But Jude never complained. He didn't want his mother to worry. At school, Jude found solace in his studies. His teachers recognized his brilliance and often praised him in class. "Jude, you've outdone yourself again," his math teacher said one day after he aced yet another exam. "You're truly one of the brightest students we've ever had." But even the praise from his teachers became another source of torment. One afternoon, as Jude was leaving the classroom, he overheard Ton and Bolaji talking. "You know why the teachers like him so much, right?" Ton sneered. "It's because they feel sorry for him. Poor kid, with no money, no connections. They give him good grades out of pity." Bolaji nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it's not like he's actually smarter than us. He's just the teacher's pet." Jude felt a pang of hurt, but he didn't let it show. He walked past them, keeping his head high. He knew the truth. His success had nothing to do with pity and everything to do with his hard work. But their words still stung. Back at home, Jude continued to focus on his studies. The closer he got to graduation, the more determined he became. His mother had sacrificed so much for him, and he wanted nothing more than to make her proud. He stayed up late every night, poring over his textbooks, writing essays, and preparing for the final exams. Sarah noticed how hard he was working and often worried that he was pushing himself too much. "Jude, you need to rest," she would say, gently placing a hand on his shoulder as he sat hunched over his books. "I will, Mom," he would reply, though he rarely did. He couldn't afford to rest. Not now, when he was so close to achieving his dreams. The day of graduation finally arrived. It was a day Sarah had been waiting for since Jude first started school. She had saved up for months, giving up small luxuries so she could buy a special dress for the occasion. It was a simple white gown, but to Sarah, it felt like the most beautiful thing she had ever owned. She spent the morning preparing, making sure every detail was perfect. She even went to the local salon to have her hair and nails done, something she had never done before. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she smiled. This was her moment too. She had worked just as hard as Jude to get to this day, and she wanted to look her best for him. As Sarah made her way to the school, she walked with a sense of pride and accomplishment. But her joy was short-lived. Just as she was nearing the gates of the school, she heard a familiar voice. Well, look who it is," Tan said, his voice dripping with malice. Bolaji stood next to him, smirking. Sarah stopped, confused. "Excuse me," she asked, unsure why these boys were addressing her. "Nice dress," Tan said, his eyes narrowing. "Where'd you get the money for that? Or did you steal it?" Bolaji laughed. "Yeah, or maybe you borrowed it. After all, street vendors don't usually wear dresses like that." Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat, but she stood her ground. "I worked hard for this," she said quietly. "I'm here to see my son graduate." Ton rolled his eyes. "Your son? What, Jude? He doesn't belong here. Neither do you." Before Sarah could respond, Ton kicked a nearby bucket of mud, sending it splashing all over her dress. Sarah gasped, stumbling backward as the mud covered her from head to toe. She stood frozen, tears welling up in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What did I ever do to you?" Ton shrugged. "You don't belong here. That's all." With that, the boys walked away, leaving Sarah standing there, covered in mud, her heart broken. For a moment, Sarah considered going home. She couldn't bear the thought of walking into the graduation looking like this. But then she thought of Jude, how hard he had worked, how much he had sacrificed. She couldn't let him down. Wiping away her tears, she gathered her strength and continued walking toward the school. When she arrived, she found a seat in the back, hoping no one would notice her. She kept her head down, her hands trembling in her lap as the ceremony began. As Jude took the stage to deliver his speech, he scanned the crowd for his mother. When he finally spotted her, his heart sank. There she was, sitting in the back, her dress stained with mud, her face pale and tear-streaked. Jude's hands clenched the podium as a wave of anger and sadness washed over him. But he couldn't let this go. Not today. Not after everything his mother had done for him. "Good evening, everyone," Jude began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I had a speech prepared for today, but after what I've just seen, I can't continue with it." The audience murmured in confusion. "Today, 2 of my classmates, Tond and Boloji, humiliated my mother. They threw mud at her because they didn't think she belonged here. But let me tell you something, my mother belongs here more than anyone in this room." The crowd gasped, and all eyes turned toward Sarah, who sat frozen in her seat. "My mother, Sarah, has worked harder than anyone I know. She raised me on her own, working day and night to provide for me. She sold handmade crafts at the market, facing the sun and the rain, just to make sure I could be here today. And now, 2 boys thought they could humiliate her because she doesn't come from wealth." Jude paused, his voice filled with passion. "But wealth doesn't define a person. Character does. And my mother has more character, more strength, than anyone else I know." Ton and Boloji sat frozen in their seats, their faces pale as the audience turned to look at them with judgmental eyes. Jude continued, "Tond, Boloji, you may have more money, but you never have what my mother has. You never understand what it means to truly work for something. To sacrifice for someone you love." The audience erupted in applause, some standing up and cheering for Sarah, who sat with tears streaming down her face. Jude turned to his mother, his voice softening. "Mom, I love you. Everything I am, everything I've achieved, is because of you. And today, I stand here to honor you." The crowd stood, clapping and cheering, as Sarah made her way to the stage, her heart swelling with pride. After the ceremony, Tond and Boloji were nowhere to be found. They had slinked out of the hall, humiliated and ashamed. Their parents, too, had been mortified by their son's behavior. Both boys faced serious consequences. Tond's father revoked his graduation gift, and Boloji's parents cancelled his plans to travel abroad for college. They were both grounded and made to work in their family businesses to learn the value of hard work and humility. Jude and Sarah walked home together, hand in hand. The weight of the day's events hung heavy on them, but there was also a sense of relief. "Mom," Jude said softly, "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Sarah smiled through her tears. "You don't need to apologize, Jude. You've made me prouder than I ever thought possible." They walked in silence for a while, the sun setting behind them, casting a golden glow over the city. For the first time in a long time, they felt at peace. They had faced the cruelty of the world together, and they had come out stronger. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's life began to change. Word of Jude's graduation speech spread throughout the town, and soon, more and more people came to her stall at the market to buy her craft. They praised her for raising such a fine young man and offered her support and encouragement. Eventually, with the money she had saved and the help of the community, Sarah was able to open her own small shop, a cozy little boutique filled with her handmade goods. It was a dream come true, and every time she looked around her shop, she thought of Jude and the journey they had taken together. One day, as Sarah was arranging items in her shop, a familiar voice called her name. She turned around to see Ton and Boloji standing in the doorway, looking nervous and unsure of themselves. "Mrs. Sarah," Ton began, his voice shaking. "We came to apologize for what we did. We were wrong, And we are truly sorry. Bolaji nodded, his face pale. We understand if you don't want to forgive us, but we wanted to tell you in person how sorry we are. Sarah looked at the two boys, seeing the remorse in their eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing, her mind racing with memories of that awful day. But then she remembered what Jude had said in his speech, that character mattered more than wealth, and that forgiveness was a part of strength. I forgive you, she said quietly. But I hope you've learned from this. Ton and Bolaji nodded, tears welling up in their eyes. We have, they said in unison. Later that evening, when Jude came home from university, Sarah told him about the boys' visit. Jude listened quietly, then smiled. Mom, you're incredible. I'm so proud of you. Sarah smiled back, her heart full. I'm proud of you too, Jude. More than you'll ever know. And as they sat together that evening, laughing and talking, they knew that no matter what challenges came their way, they would always have each other. I hope you enjoyed the tale. If so, please like the video, comment, share it with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.